Tuesday the 28th, I traveled with the comrades from the Socialist Equality Party from Colombo to Kegalle. We traveled the 70-kilometer route along the Colombo-Kandy Road towards the Central Hills country, passing through impoverished areas where I saw street vendors selling pineapple and cashews and coconuts along the route. It took us 2.5 hours to travel through this countryside, and I had the great fortune of having comrades who had great experiences in telling me the historical background, the political traditions of these areas. We stopped at the mausoleum for both Bandaranaike and his wife. He is presented in the history of Sri Lanka by the bourgeoisie, the media, and also those who betrayed the struggle for socialism, like the LSSP, as more or less the patriotic father of this country that single-handedly led a struggle against poverty and the oppression of British imperialism. The scene that I saw there painted a very different picture. In fact, the mausoleum is placed in a state, and his family, the Bandaranaike family, was one of the largest landowners in this entire area. And far from struggling against British imperialism, I was told by my comrades, he was granted the right by the British colonial powers to whip people, the villagers, and his own servants. He was, in fact, the gatekeeper for the British governor. We continued our trip, as I said, through quite fascinating landscape. I saw workers in paddy fields picking rice. I saw vendors on the street sides, and again I was struck by the enormous poverty and impoverishment of this island of 21 million people, and the legacy of both British and American imperialism. As we arrived and got closer to Kegalle, we took a long drive up a winding road towards a rubber plantation. It struck me, I commented to comrades, that it was much like the Appalachian Hills in West Virginia, going through the hollows and going to small mining towns. It was kind of like passing back into time, seeing the lines of workers' homes owned by the company. In fact, I asked one worker if he made any kind of trouble, could they expel him from his home? He said yes, and that had happened often. Once again, I had an opportunity with my comrades to speak before a group of rubber plantation workers. They at first didn't quite know what to make of an American politician coming into their village. They've been peppered with bourgeois politicians from the SLFP and the UNP because of the district elections, and many of them expressed a sort of wariness about another politician. But we quickly explained that, in fact, my campaign was not a bourgeois campaign, was not a campaign to exploit them, but was a revolutionary campaign, a socialist and working class campaign, and that I was there as a representative of the working class in the United States and the socialist movement, and that the working class in Sri Lanka, throughout Asia, throughout the world, and within the United States had the same interests. And that was a struggle against the great multinational corporations which oppress all workers. I explained my opposition to war and all of the claims by those who promoted Obama that he would not be for war and for the oppression of the peoples of the Middle East, Asia, and Latin America. Of course, he's waged more wars and has sought to tighten the grip of imperialism throughout the world, including on this island in the Indian Ocean. We received a very strong sympathy, a very strong interest, and a very great warmth. I was invited to walk through the homes of the plantation workers. One took me inside of a bedroom which had a floor of dried cow dung. He explained that 10 people slept inside that bedroom, which was no larger than perhaps a small bedroom in England or the United States. Let me say closer to the size of a bathroom. These images, these conditions were quite shocking and engendered in me a deep anger over what imperialism and capitalism does to the vast majority of the working class, the billions who in fact live in Asia. The plantation workers, and particularly the young people, spoke quite fervently about their determination not to live under the conditions of oppression that I saw. I met older workers who had begun working at the age of 14 and who had retired, barely living on pensions, and a young worker who had made his way out of the village into the city of Colombo and working in a hotel, who had a somewhat better lifestyle. However, he had to take care of his own mother and father because of the grinding poverty that they confronted as they grew older. He had a television inside of one of these huts. I asked him what did he think when he turned on the television and saw the big houses, the fancy mansions in the West, and he looked at the conditions here in Sri Lanka, and he said everyone should have a decent home. He felt that that was not unreasonable, but that was absolutely necessary in modern society. I had a chance also to speak with the plantation workers themselves. A young worker, perhaps in his mid-20s, came. He explained to me that he had dug the trunks of about 125 trees that morning to allow the latex to drip from the trees. Of course, latex that is then sold on the world market. He explained that if the plantation workers worked 21 days in a row, they would make a certain salary. But if rain interrupted, then they couldn't get 21 days in a row, then they would only be given a minimum salary, perhaps half of the monthly salary. He explained that no one could live. He could hardly feed his family, buy a loaf of bread. He showed me his paycheck, the meager amounts of money that he was paid. But there was a long list of deductions. And I asked him, what is this? And he explained that there were deductions because of the company housing and other items that he had bought. But then he said one of these deductions was for the union at the rubber plantation. So I asked him, what does the union do for you? And he looked at me and said, the union does absolutely nothing. He actually used a Tamil word which in polite company I can't repeat. This was a very moving experience for me. It focused in my own mind the absolute necessity for a common struggle by the working class in every country, that the American working class cannot live if its brothers and sisters in Asia live under such conditions of oppression and exploitation by the same multinational companies that exploit the working class in the U.S. This was my trip. This is my report. This is Jerry White for the Socialist Equality Party and the World Socialist website.